They are regarded as the most dangerous species of aliens in the galaxy, capable of wiping out entire races and sterilizing entire planets of species not of their own kind. But only one can hold that title: Xenomorphs, the outer space serpents, and the Flood, the dead reincarnate. Considering that a one-on-one battle between the two would be unfair, we will have an entire Xenomorph hive and its main casts versus a Flood hive and all of its main forms. I'm one fish mob, and it's my job to see who would win in a fight. LV-427. The first planet to feel the full force of what is said to be the sharks of the universe. All inhabitants were either killed or impregnated by them. These creatures are known as Xenomorphs. Xenomorphs are usually group-based ambush predators that hunt by using their sleek, streamlined bodies and their ability to climb on nearly all surfaces for stealth. In a typical Xenomorph hive, all Xenomorphs have a telepathic link that lets them communicate with one another as a group. All Xenomorphs have shown to possess some form of intelligence and sapience, seeing how they all understand how a ship and its pilot works, while others don't know how a gun works despite seeing it firsthand. But they wouldn't be such fierce creatures if they didn't have an arsenal to go with it. Their teeth and claws can leave deep scratch marks on predator armor. Their tails can impale and lift prey. Every mature Xenomorph has an inner jaw that they use to punch heads open and to eat with. Oh, and their inner jaws can punch through the predator's helmet effortlessly. But their most iconic trait is also their greatest defense: their acid blood. This blood is the Xenomorph's main defense, as I said before. If it were to lose a limb or its head in combat, its blood will either spray or spill out onto the ground or onto the opponent/prey, severely injuring or killing it. The blood is shown to be acidic enough to eat through solid rock, metal, and just a small vial of it almost ate through a spaceship instantly. And due to this, the Xenomorphs are immune to anything acidic, and the only thing that can harm them that's remotely like acid is chemicals that break down organic material at the molecular level. All Xenomorph hives have several different castes, depending on the environment, but we'll just stick to the bare essentials. No matter what the caste is, all Xenomorphs start off with face huggers. Hatching from eggs laid by a queen, these bug-like creatures can leap great distances in order to latch onto a potential victim's face. And if there is something in the way, the facehugger excretes acid to melt through the obstacle. They will then implant embryos into its victim, and then it will die shortly afterwards. The next stage in the Xenomorph life cycle is the chestburster. They are the resulting offspring of a facehugger that latched onto its victim. The chestburster will eventually burst out of the victim's chest into a larval state. All chestbursters are sneaky like snakes and highly aggressive. Definitely the most iconic type of Xenomorph are the drones. Drones are the very first discovered Xenomorph caste, and is the most common type seen in media. They spit cysts of their own acidic blood at their enemies, but they mainly collect victims for impregnation. The warrior caste is the one of the more dangerous castes of Xenomorphs. Even though they mostly appear in video games, they are the primary assault caste. Their acidic blood is pressurized, so any damage or blunt force trauma will cause the bloodstream to burst apart, drenching nearby enemies with the corrosive body fluid. All Xenomorphs are led by a queen. Being the alpha Xenomorph, it is the largest caste of any Xenomorph hive in the official canon. The queen has greater intelligence over her subjects. This is due to her having a superior ability to relate cause and effect. Her main role is to reproduce through her ovipositor. There she lays eggs with it. but she is able to detach from the ovipositor in an emergency. The aliens have proven many times that anyone who takes them lightly will most likely become chow for the hive. They are able to go toe-to-toe with and defeat predators, has destroyed entire ship crews in short periods of time, can dodge bullets at gunpoint, has infested entire civilizations, and the Queen once survived a point-blank nuclear explosion under the Antarctic ice that buried her under collapsed ice. And she dug her way out unscathed. But all Xenomorphs share common weaknesses. Fire and explosives are the most effective way of ensuring their death. They can be dismembered even though it's deadly to the person or creature doing it, and normal weaponry can cause lethal harm depending on where it hits. But hey, you'll have to find it first before you get the first hit. Millennia ago, as the Forerunner Precursor War drew to a close, the few remaining precursors that were pushed out beyond the edges of the galaxy to pass Kasona sought vengeance against the Forerunners. Few precursors were spared by the Forerunners, while others became a dust which could regenerate into their past forms. Over time, this dust became so corrupted that it could only cause horrific disease and mutation. The precursors, driven insane by the rebellion of their creations, embraced this corruption and became part of it, becoming what is now known as the Flood. The Flood quickly destroyed the Forerunners, and as a final act of vengeance against them, they sent several ships containing this powder to Forerunner-controlled planets. The Flood are highly virulent parasitic organisms driven by a desire to infect any sentient life they encounter. The way the Flood works closely resembles a utopian socialist ideal, as there is no wealth, no poverty, no want, no crime, and no disease. Every individual works for the advancement of the Flood as a whole. Even though they aren't the greatest threat, they are widely considered to be the greatest threat to the whole existence of life in the Milky Way, thus far. Any and all Flood hives contain the most basic of Flood forms. Flood spores. These spores are crucial in the formation of Flood hives. These spores are also used as methods of suffocating future hosts and clearing the area of uninfected hostiles. It can clog air filtration systems to make it easier to infect hosts, and if a spore lands in an area that can support it, it will form a Flood growth pod. If the area does not have enough biomass, the spore will spread over floors and walls until it covers as much as it can to help support the growth pod. It is possible if a non-infected host inhales or becomes covered with these spores, then the host may become infected through isogenic replication, or the body will be dissolved into the necessary nutrients demanded to create the various forms needed at the time. But the most effective way of infecting hosts is with Flood supercells. These cells are inserted directly into the host where it infects and mutates the infected individual. Also, the Flood is capable of local coordination and through the use of pheromone-based communication. Every Flood has a cast of wide abilities. Carrier forms are formed from older combat forms or from bodies that are unsuitable for combat. These forms act as incubators for newly created infected forms, keeping them safe until they're fully developed. Once the infection forms are ready, the carrier simply explodes spontaneously, sending the new infection forms flying into the air. It was the carrier dying in the process. Infection forms are the result of an exploding carrier. The infection form burrows into the victim's chest and attacks the nervous system. It does this with the help of small tentacles used for penetrating the skin of a victim's body. And to boot, any foe without shielding/protection will be prone to instant death or infection. The infection form overwrites the host's DNA, which causes rapid mutation. If an infection form infects the host, it will become a standard combat form. These forms typically lunges at opponents and whips them with large appendages growing out of its hand. These forms will sometimes carry a weapon held previously by the infected host, but their main role is to search for potential hosts or accumulate enough to create a central Gravemind. But that's not the only combat form. Sangheli, or elite combat forms, are far more agile and resilient and is capable of utilizing its host's armor abilities, such as active camouflage and energy shields, to assist them in combat. But when Flood spores end up mutating past the expected peak, it can become many pure forms, which essentially transform the host into a pure incarnation of the Flood. And the largest pure form is the Flood tank. The tank has great resilience, but is slow compared to other combat forms, and like the other Flood forms where they have tentacles to whip, the arms of a tank are hardened spikes, which are used for the devastating melee attack. It can run on all fours for a short period of time, allowing a short burst of speed to overtake a target, and on occasion, take forms eject infection forms from their mouth, as if regurgitating them as a form of short-ranged attack. Not explosively like Flood carrier forms, but if enough bodies of the Flood accumulate, it will become a Gravemind. A near omniscient creature with complete control over all Flood forms. It's a mix of Flood supercells and the complex neurosystem of hundreds or thousands of sentients. This assimilated intelligence and memories of consumed hosts become part of a collective consciousness of the Gravemind, and due to it having complete control, it's capable of strategic thinking and commanding individual Flood forms in an organized manner. The Flood has proven itself as a dangerous foe to any. It's extremely adaptable, widely considered to be the greatest threat to the whole existence of life, infested entire galaxies, and fought in many wars. But due to it being a hive mind, they hold many weaknesses. Without a Gravemind, the Flood forms lack the ability to coordinate their efforts during its feral stage. The Flood is only capable of local coordination through use of pheromone-based communication, and usually attacks with only the one arm that has the tentacles or spikes on it. Still, you have to hope they don't infect you first if you go to fight them.
This one is machine and nerve, and has its mind concluded. This one is but flesh and faith, and is the more deluded. This one's contentment, and this one's great journey are the same. And I have listened through rock and metal and time. Now I shall talk, and you shall listen. Fight!
So why did the Xenomorphs win this war? Well, both the Flood and Xenomorph cast could easily counter the other. Carrier forms can counter facehuggers, chestbursters countering infection forms, drones countering standard combat forms with their stealth. Elite combat forms could counter the warrior cast by using equipment they have from the Halo universe, which by all means is far superior to whatever weapons the Colonial Marines have on, and so on. And the Gravemind could easily strategically guide them through combat. Heck, they even had the chance of actually outlasting the Xenomorphs, but it all came down to one question. Can the Flood counteract or get past the Xenomorph's acid blood? The answer? No. The Flood infection form only infects creatures from the Halo universe, and because of this, it nullifies one of the Flood's most important factions, being able to infect them, which relies on burrowing into victims. The same can be said with any other Flood form. They had to get up close and personal with the Xenomorph themselves. And whenever they got past the armor, the acidic blood easily damaged, injured, or killed them. The only Flood form that stood a single chance at successfully infecting the Xenomorphs would be the Flood spores. But even then, they were nulled and voided since the earliest forms of Xenomorph were born from a similar virus and or slime and showed immunity to it afterwards. It doesn't even help that even though the Gravemind assimilated crew members with knowledge of the Xenomorphs themselves have just survived and endured a lot worse. So in the end, the Flood just met its match. The winner are the Xenomorphs.
We don't do rap!